Hello there, and welcome to another episode of On the Case. And today, I'm on the case of Hatism. Yes, Hatism. There are people who dislike and distrust people because they wear hats. But there's something a little bit more. Because in my case, my hat I use for when I ride a bicycle. And it is a demonstrable effect. It has been studied and it has been tested. And there is empirical evidence to go with it as well, that drivers will overtake more closely if you're wearing a helmet, if you're wearing a cycle hat, than if you're not wearing a cycle hat. People will put your life at risk just because you're wearing a hat. How hatist is that? Okay. Now, there's a couple of bits that come down to it here. The first part is that there was a study done by Dr. Ian Walker, who's a professor in traffic psychology. And he conducted a study showing how cyclists wearing helmets affected the behaviour of drivers. He found that those wearing a helmet, motorists drove much closer when overtaking. In absolute terms, they got about sort of 8 or 9 centimeters closer than they did when he wasn't wearing one. He did this in testing this himself. And the proportion of vehicles getting within a really close distance went up considerably. In Australia, a few years ago, they made cycle helmets compulsory. And the accident rate for cyclists went up. Because what happens is a car driver's coming up from behind and they say, oh, he's wearing a helmet, or they're wearing a helmet. And, they sort of think, well, if I get a bit closer and I bump them and they fall off, they'll be all right. The problem is a lot of people don't realise that this isn't a motorbike helmet. This isn't a crash helmet. It has the impact is designed for about 15 miles an hour at most, which is the amount you'd fall off. So it's not going to save my life. In fact, because of the weight of it and things like that, the only thing it'll help me, it has an element of safety if I fall off and bang my head on concrete. But it's not going to defend my limbs. It's not going to prevent crush damage. But also, the evidence suggests that drivers think that helmeted cyclists are more sensible and predictable and experienced. So the driver doesn't have to worry as much for their safety. Non-helmeted cyclists, especially non-helmeted women cyclists, were less predictable according to the study. That was the perception, from the driver saying, oh, and he even put on a wig to see what the difference was. Now, it kind of worries me that when I'm riding along and I get someone who wants to overtake me, that they're going to risk my safety just so they can get to the traffic lights a few moments earlier, And in a collision with a car, there's crumple zones and airbags and all that kind of stuff. Me, it's just skin and bone on a metal frame, okay? And in a collision, I'm going to come off worse, just to save a couple of seconds. It infuriates me. And the amount of times when you hear sort of, oh, well, they'll be all right if they're wearing a helmet. No, they could quite easily have been knocked off and broken their neck, in which case they may be permanently disabled in a wheelchair and having nothing below the neck, or they could just be dead. So there is some serious hatism out there, And other people, they get teased or they get looked at funny. Me, I get people risking my life. So that's what hatism does. And that's why it's so wrong. That's on the case. Take care.